Some houses don't wait. They observe. This one listens to every breath, measures every step, learns what you fear before you do. The knocks behind the sealed doorway aren't warnings. They're interest, calculation, hunger. And once the house decides you belong to it, you're already gone. This is the story of the house that forgot you were alive. Some houses remember. They remember who built them, whose hands shaped their beams, whose breath warmed their rooms in winter. They remember who laughed inside them, who cried in the corners no one else noticed, who whispered secrets into the walls when they thought no one was listening. They remember who died in them. The last exhale, the stillness afterward, the way silence settles like dust over a life that has ended. They remember birthdays and arguments, storms and summers, the weight of footsteps on the stairs at 3:14 p.m. in late October, when the light hits the floorboards just right, and the whole house feels like it's holding its breath. But some houses forget. They forget that people are separate things. They forget that the bodies moving through their rooms are not organs, not blood, not pieces of themselves. They forget that the person who sleeps inside them is not just another object to arrange, to keep, to absorb. They forget that we are not, strictly speaking, theirs. And when a house forgets, it begins to behave like anything else that has lost its sense of boundaries. It reaches, it listens, it hungers. It starts to fold the people inside it into its memory, the way roots fold into soil. Slowly, quietly, inevitably. Some houses remember, some houses forget. And the ones that forget are the ones you should never stay in after dark. This is the story of one of those houses, and the person who moved into it 2 weeks before the walls stopped pretending he was a guest. His name doesn't matter. Call him Daniel. Mid-30s, single, tired in the way people get when all their big decisions turned out to be fine on paper and wrong in the heart. He'd broken up with the love of his life, who he thought he'd marry. He'd left a job that paid well, but ate chunks of his sanity each quarter. He drifted for a while, sublets, sofas, cities that all began to blur. When the email came from the rental agency, he was not in a place to be picky. Studio flat, old building, cheap, immediate move-in. The photos were fine, high ceilings, big window, exposed brick. The ad called it industrial charm. He called it not another beige box and took it. The building had no name on the front, just a number half obscured by ivy. 5 floors, thin, warped glass in the stairwell, a smell in the lobby that slid between dust and something sweeter. The landlord met him in the corridor outside the flat. You know the type. Thin, polite, not quite present. He handed over keys like he'd rather be handing over a problem. "Top floor's quiet," the landlord said. "You won't have anyone walking over your head." "What about below?" Daniel asked. The landlord smiled a little too quickly. "They keep to themselves," he said. "Just don't knock on doors after midnight. Sound carries." It was an odd thing to say. Daniel brushed it off. People say stranger things in cities. The studio itself was better than he'd expected. Tall windows along one wall, a section of bare brick that felt honest, in a way drywall didn't. Floorboards that creaked but seemed solid. The bathroom was a leftover from an older plan, tiled, narrow, faintly claustrophobic. It didn't bother him. The rent was $300 less than anything else in the neighborhood. He unpacked alone. Cracked mugs, clean but frayed sheets, books he'd held onto as if words could anchor him. He put the bed under the window. The landlord gave him a look as if he'd said something in a language Daniel didn't speak yet, but said nothing. "Internet's set up," the landlord said. Heat works when it feels like it. Don't open the far wall." Daniel blinked. "What?" The man pointed. Along the interior wall opposite the windows, half hidden behind a fresh coat of paint, was the faint outline of an old doorway. Framed, sealed, plastered over. "You had an adjoining unit?" Daniel asked. "Once," the landlord said. "We closed it. Party wall now, just leave it." He left before Daniel could ask why. The flat settled around him like a held breath. The first night was uneventful. He made noodles. He opened a beer. He sat on the floor with his back against the exposed brick and listened to the city noise. Sirens. Someone shouting 3 streets over. A train. Nothing from inside the building. No footsteps overhead. No muffled TV through the wall. The silence felt like a gift. He slept badly anyway. New places always made him hyper-aware. The tiny whir of the fridge, the click of pipes. He woke once to the sound of something shifting in the wall above his head. Not rats, not water. A long, slow slide, like someone dragging a heavy trunk across a carpeted floor. He told himself it was a neighbor, then remembered he was on the top floor. He lay there, heart thumping too hard in too quiet a room, and eventually drifted off. In the morning, all of it felt smaller. Weirder things woke you in other flats. This one was just old. Old buildings have noises. He made coffee. He didn't look too closely at the faint crack in the plaster above his head that hadn't been there the day before. He kept odd hours, freelance work, overnight deadlines. The second strange thing happened at 3:12 a.m., 3 days after he moved in. He was at his small desk near the window, laptop glow flattening his face, when he heard it. 3 knocks. Not at his door, inside his wall. The sealed one, knuckles on plaster, not loud, not urgent. Measured. He froze. The laptop's cursor blinked patiently in the half-written sentence. The room felt smaller. He told himself it had come from the corridor. He stood, opened his door. The corridor outside was empty. Lights humming, carpet deadening any echo. No sound from other flats, no doors closing. Back inside, he stared at the outline of the old doorway in his wall. The paint over it was newer. Off-white instead of the soft yellow the rest of the room had aged into. The frame lines were faint, but there. A rectangle pretending it wasn't. He laughed once, quietly, because the alternative was not laughing. "You're tired," he told himself. "You're hearing things." He went back to his laptop. 3 more knocks. This time he saw the plaster jump. Just a millimeter. Each knock bulged the wall inward and let it fall back. Like skin over a mouth. He didn't sleep that night. Rational explanations are easy, at first. Pipes expanding, buildings settling, old beams complaining. He Googled old building knocks in walls and scrolled past 100 message boards where people blamed ghosts or subpar landlords with equal fervor. He messaged the landlord in the morning. "Hey, getting some odd noises in the sealed wall at night, like knocking. Just checking there's no utility shaft." "Loose panel in there?" No reply. He heard movement in the corridor later. Opened his door. The landlord was at the far end, keys in hand, turning away. "Did you get my text?" Daniel called. The man flinched, then pasted on a smile. "Old place," he said. "Sound travels weird. You'll get used to it." "It's in the wall," Daniel insisted. "The sealed door." "Something's—" "Don't open it," the landlord said sharply. The smile slipped. For a moment, something like fear crossed his face. Then he shook himself. "Sorry," he said. "Just don't. There's wiring in there. Old construction. Might be vermin." I'll call someone." He didn't. That night, the knocks came again. 3 at 2:47, 2 at 4:01, 1 at 4:03. They had a rhythm now, like code, or like someone testing. By the end of the first week, the flat felt different. He couldn't say how. The measurements were the same, window to wall, door to sink. He'd checked. But when he walked from one end to the other, the time it took seemed to stretch. He'd cross the space and feel like it took half a second more than it should. Enough to notice, not enough to prove. Shadows collected more thickly near the sealed door. Light from the windows reached it just fine during the day. At night, it seemed to pull darkness to it, like ink soaking into paper. He woke one night to find he was standing, not in bed, in front of the sealed wall, bare feet on cold floor, hand raised. Fingertips a breath from the plaster. His nails were full of white dust. He hadn't grabbed a flashlight. He hadn't checked his phone. He had no idea how long he'd been there. His heart hammered in his throat. He lowered his hand slowly, backed away. The bed behind him looked further than it should. He didn't sleep at all after that. He bought a cheap battery-powered CO detector. He thought about mold, carbon monoxide, solvents in old paint. Anything that could explain sleepwalking, time slippage, auditory hallucinations. The detector showed normal levels. If anything, the air was thin, too clean. Like an office building, like a sealed box. Sometimes, standing by the window with it cracked open, he'd feel better. More there. Sometimes he'd find himself drifting back to the center of the room, to the strip of floor right in front of the sealed doorway. He started placing things there. A chair, a stack of books, his suitcase. He'd wake to find them moved an inch, or turned slightly, as if someone had navigated around them and nudged them with a knee. Once, badly, he woke to find the chair back in its original place by the desk, and the strip of floor in front of the wall empty. His footprints were in the dust, bare, side by side, facing the wall. His socks were by the bed. His toes were cold. The knocks that night weren't knocks. They were scrapes, like nails, from the other side, working along the frame lines, up, down, mapping the edges. He tried not to tell anyone. Some embarrassments are easier to confess. Relationships, money. But I think my wall wants something from me didn't fit in a text. He lasted 4 more days. Then an old friend called. Someone who'd known him before the moves, before the burnout, before the nights he stopped trusting the silence. "How's the new place?" she asked. He almost said fine. The automatic answer, the safe one. But something in her voice, familiarity maybe, or the memory of who he used to be, cracked the shell he'd been holding together. Instead, he said, "Can I ask you something weird?" He told her, in pieces, the version that wouldn't make him sound unhinged. The clean version. Knocks he couldn't explain. Sleepwalking he didn't remember starting. Shadows that didn't behave like shadows. He left out the rest. The part where the walls felt warm sometimes, like something was breathing behind them. The part where he'd wake up standing in the hallway with his hand pressed flat against the plaster. The part where he sometimes felt an urge, quiet, insistent, to lean in close, press his ear to the wall, and just listen, as if the house had something to say, as if it had been waiting for him to ask. "That sounds like stress," she said gently. "You've been through a lot. New place, old building. Your nervous system is probably just on overdrive. Have you talked to anyone since you left the job?" "You think I'm making it up," he said. "I think your brain is trying to make shape out of noise," she said. "You do that. You always have." He laughed, brittle. "Buildings don't want things," he said. "Not really. "Of course they don't," she said. "They're just walls." After they hung up, the flat felt offended, as if something in the plaster had heard "just" and taken it personally. The knocks that night came earlier. 1:11 a.m. 5 of them, right by the bed. He could have left. He should have. But there are gravity wells in life. Jobs, families, addictions, debt. The cheap rent was an anchor tied around his ankle. Freelance work had dried up. He had enough to scrape through 2 more months. Then what? Another move. Another lease he probably couldn't break. Another city that wouldn't care. It was easier, in a sick way, to believe the wall could be negotiated with. He tried talking to it. He knew how that sounded. He did it anyway. One evening, around dusk, he stood in the center of the room and said out loud, "I'm not going to open you, whatever you are. I'm not. Stop asking." Silence. The rest of the building seemed to hold its breath. He waited, felt foolish. He turned away. His phone buzzed. He jumped. It was a calendar reminder he'd forgotten to delete. Anniversary. He hadn't realized what day it was. For a moment, he was back in another flat, another city, another version of himself. He didn't hear the first knock. He felt it, in his teeth. He turned very slowly. The middle of the wall, the place where the old door would have opened, was bowing inward. Not much, an inch. Then 2, like a slow, cold inhale. The paint cracked in a hair-thin line along the frame. White dust drifted down like ash. He saw, just for a second, something in that crack. Not light, not dark, a seam, like the edge of another room pressed up against this one. He took a step back. His heel hit the bed. The bulge in the wall pulsed once. Then, like a muscle deciding it had learned enough, relaxed. The plaster flattened. The crack snapped shut. The dust on the floor rearranged itself. Not settling. Rearranging. Smoothing. As if a hand had run over it from the other side. He didn't move until sunrise. The landlord stopped answering his texts. The knocks changed. They weren't just at night anymore. Sometimes midday, he'd hear a faint tapping from inside the wall, like someone idly drumming fingers on a table while they waited. He started working from cafes, libraries, anywhere that didn't smell like his own fear. The flat resented it. He could feel it when he came back, the air thicker, the distance from door to window longer. Once, he opened his fridge, and every label on every jar was turned, facing away. Nothing missing, nothing added, just rotated, as if the house was testing his attention. Measuring, he slept less. A human brain without sleep starts to come apart at the edges. Shadows move, voices warp. You forget things. Important ones, like whether the marks on your arms are from bumping into furniture or from being held in place by something you can't quite remember. He woke one morning with bruises around both wrists, perfectly parallel. The kind human hands make. His were clean. The skin under his fingernails was clean. The plaster dust under his feet was not. It escalated slowly. Then all at once, he came home after 3 days of avoiding the place, crashing on a friend's couch, pretending it was just for fun, and the key stuttered in the lock. Not because it was stuck, because the door had moved, half a centimeter lower, enough that the latch didn't line up. He had to lift as he turned it. Shoulder pressed into the wood. When it opened, the heat hit him. Not from the radiator, from the walls. They were warm, every surface, like the building had a fever. He stepped inside because there was nowhere else to go. The door shut behind him with a soft, final click, even though he hadn't touched it. The air tasted like dust and drywall and something metallic underneath. He dropped his bag. It didn't bounce the way it should. The floor had give, like cartilage. He backed up, pressed his palm to the exposed brick. It was solid. He pressed his other hand to the sealed wall. It was not. Firmer than flesh. Softer than stone. As if something on the other side was pressing back, just enough to meet him. "Stop," he whispered. He hadn't meant to say it out loud. It didn't matter. The house didn't speak his language. Or it did and didn't care. The knock started low. By his knee, then at hip level, then at shoulder. Ascending, neat as numbers on a tape measure. He realized, suddenly, exactly what was happening. It was measuring him. Height, width, depth, volume. How much space he took up. How much of itself it would have to rearrange to add him. The last knock was at his temple, right where skull thins near the eye. His vision went white, then black. Then he came to on the floor, flat on his back, staring at the ceiling. Except, it wasn't his ceiling. It was the same dimensions, same light fixture, same crack in one corner. But the paint was wrong, too smooth, too new. The bulb was off, but there was light, soft, sourceless. He pushed himself up on his elbows. The room was his, or it was supposed to be. Bed, desk, window. The sealed wall he tried not to think about. But the window showed nothing. No alley. No opposite building. No streetlight glow bleeding through the glass. Just gray. Not fog. Fog moves, curls, breathes. This was still. Flat. Featureless. Like someone had painted over the world with a single dead color. He blinked. It didn't change. The gray wasn't outside the window. It was the window. As if the glass had forgotten how to show anything else. A faint vibration hummed through the floorboards, subtle enough to doubt, strong enough to feel in his teeth. The air felt thick, as if the room were holding something in its lungs. He swallowed. The gray didn't move, didn't shift, didn't even pretend to be natural. It just waited. Like it was aware of him, like it was deciding whether to let him see what was on the other side. He stood slowly. His head didn't hurt. His wrists didn't hurt. There were no bruises. He called out the landlord's name. Nothing. He went to the door, opened it. The corridor outside was gone. Or somewhere else. It stretched longer than it should. Too many doors. All the same. All wrong. No stairs, no lobby, just hallway. He shut the door, heart jackhammering. He went to the window, leaned in, put his face to the glass. Cold bled into his skin, sharp enough to sting, as if the pain itself were exhaling against him. And then he saw it. Faint at first, like reflections that didn't belong to him. Not the city he knew, not the alley, not the opposite building. Layers, outlines of other rooms, other walls, other lives, stacked like thin sheets of tracing paper. A woman reading in a chair that wasn't there. A child dragging a toy across a floor that didn't exist. A man hanging a picture on a nail in a wall that overlapped his by half a meter, hammering in slow, looping motions, as if caught in a memory that refused to finish. None of them looked at him. None of them reacted. They moved through their spaces like echoes, unaware, unseeing, repeating. He pressed closer. The glass felt warmer now, almost pulsing. And with a slow, descending horror, he understood. He wasn't looking out. He was looking through time, through layouts, through every version of this place that had ever existed. He wasn't in his city. He wasn't even in his apartment. He was inside the house. Not the building, not the structure, but the idea of it. The accumulation. The sediment of decades layered on top of each other. Rooms built over rooms. Lives lived over lives. Walls shifting like tectonic plates. And beneath all of it, beneath the people, beneath the years, beneath the architecture itself, something else waited. Something that had been here long before any of them. Something that had learned to wear the house like a skin. He turned toward the sealed wall. There was no plaster now, no faint frame lines, just an opening, perfectly rectangular, perfectly dark, breathing. In, out, waiting. He tried the obvious things, the door, the corridor, the window. None of them behaved the way they should. The door opened, yes, but only into hallways that folded back on themselves like paper creased the wrong way. He'd walk for what felt like 10 minutes, heart pounding, sweat cold on his back, only to step out into the same patch of floor he'd started on, as if the house had quietly rotated around him while he wasn't looking. The corridor stretched and contracted with each attempt, the shadows along the baseboards shifting like they were breathing. Sometimes the light switches worked, sometimes they didn't. Sometimes the lights came on before he touched them. The window was worse. It didn't show the street anymore. It didn't show anything that belonged to him. Instead, it displayed lives he had never lived, rooms that weren't his, people who weren't there, movements that didn't match the world outside, a neighborhood that no longer existed, or maybe never had. The only thing that remained consistent was the opening. Always there. Always dark. Always just a little too wide to ignore. A mouth in the architecture. He stayed away from it. At first, he paced the room until the floorboards groaned under the repetition. He shouted until his throat burned. No one answered, not even the echo. Eventually, exhaustion dragged him down. He slept, not because he felt safe, but because his body simply stopped negotiating. And as he drifted off, the house seemed to settle with him. Not relaxing. Waiting. When he woke, he was closer to it. Still on the bed. But the bed had moved. 3 inches. 4. Toward the opening. He dragged it back, wedged the desk against it, piled everything he owned in a barricade. He slept again. Woke with splinters in his hands and the barricade dismantled. The opening closer. He had no memory of moving anything. He started talking to it. Not asking, bargaining. "I won't knock," he said. "I won't open. Leave me here. I'll stay. I'll be quiet. I'll be part of the walls if that's what you want. Just don't." He couldn't finish the sentence. The opening exhaled. The air coming out of it wasn't hot or cold. It was aware. It surrounded him. Tasted him. Worked its way into his ears, his nose, his mouth, like a hand feeling along the inside of a glove. He gagged. The house did not care. This wasn't malice, it was curiosity. Like a child with a new toy. Like someone testing how far a joint can bend before it breaks. At some point, hours, days, he had no measure anymore. He stopped asking why. Why him? Why now? Why this house? He knew the answer, or at least the shape of it. The house had forgotten he was a person. It had forgotten he was separate, that he had edges, that he was not something it could rearrange at will. It had forgotten it was made of parts, boards, nails, plaster, and not a single living organism with a hunger for symmetry. Or maybe it hadn't forgotten at all. Maybe it had simply decided he fit better inside its memory, inside its layout, inside whatever passed for its understanding. In the end, when he finally stepped forward, it wasn't a choice. Not really. He woke standing at the threshold. bare feet on a floor that was no longer wood. The texture had changed, softer, grain losing distinction, as if the fibers had rearranged to make room. He could have stepped back, in theory. He looked over his shoulder. There was a door, a bed, a window, but they looked flat, like stage dressing. The only thing in the room with depth was the opening. You could get used to anything, he thought distantly. Even this. He closed his eyes, took one step. Something met him. Not arms, not hands. Pressure on every point of his body at once, not crushing. Holding, as if the space in the walls had flexed to accept him. His skin crawled. Something slid between his ribs without needing a gap, not piercing, filling. He remembered, absurdly, the landlord saying, "Top floor's quiet. You won't have anyone walking over your head." He wondered distantly who else had stepped like this, who else had been absorbed. He opened his mouth to scream. The house inhaled. The sound never left him. It went in, down. Into the structure, into the cavities between beams, into the dead chimneys, into the hollow cores of doors. He felt, as his edges blurred, his name peel off his brain like old tape. He reached for it. The house took that, too. Time after that meant nothing. He did not sleep. He did not wake. He existed as a smear of awareness spread along plaster and brick and oak. He knew, in the way a building knows, where weight rested, where footsteps fell, where air moved. He felt the city outside in vibrations through the foundation. Trucks, cars, voices, muffled, irrelevant. He felt other rooms in other years. A woman sobbing into a pillow in 1974. A child coloring on wallpaper in 1992. A man smoking at a window in 2005. They were all silhouettes now, shadows on the inside of him. He could not speak to them. They could not hear him. He was not a person. He was a property. Sometimes, when a tenant dragged a chair across his floor, he flinched. The chair moved anyway. Sometimes, when someone leaned against the sealed wall, he felt the imprint of their shoulder and thought, "Don't." But the thought had no teeth, no knock, no sound. It was just a change in the density of the air no one noticed. Once, years, decades, later, he felt a familiar pattern. 3 knocks, inside a wall, not from him, from someone living. A new tenant, curious, testing. He tried to push back, to hold, to keep the wall thick and uninterested. But the house was bigger than him. Older things lived in the metal and stone, things that had forgotten people long before he'd moved in with his fragile little suitcase and his hope. The knocks came again. They came again, closer to where he remembered his head had been. He felt the studs tremble, the paint hairline crack, felt the building's attention focus like a lens. Not on him, on whoever stood there now. He wanted to scream, to slam the wall outward, to throw their hand back the way Boone had thrown him. Boone? No. Wrong story. Wrong house. Wrong life. He was running together. Other people's dogs, other people's choices. This was what happened when you were smeared too thin across too many years. He gathered himself anyway. What little self there was. Pooled every whisper of memory he had. The way coffee smelled on the first morning he'd moved in. The ache in his chest when he saw his anniversary reminder. The warmth of his own skin under his own hands when he still knew which was which. He pushed. Not on the wall. On the idea of the wall. On the space where the new tenant stood. 3 inches. Just enough. The next knock missed. Fingers hit solid plaster instead of the seam. Bone met resistance. The human on the other side hissed in pain. He felt them pull their hand back, felt weight shift away from that spot, felt breath catch in a throat he didn't own anymore. For a moment, the house hissed, not with sound, with irritation, like a body experiencing an itch it could not quite scratch. It flexed. He braced. Splinters of self scattered down through joists and pipes. The opening thinned. Not gone, never gone, but narrowed, starved. The building sulked, insofar as a building could. The new tenant walked away, out to the corridor, down the stairs. He felt every step as a small mercy. They'd be back, he knew. Not them, maybe, the next one, or the next. Places like this don't float empty forever. Cities see to that. Cheap rent has its own gravity. He couldn't stop the house, not really. But he understood something now. You don't get out. Not once you're part of the walls. You don't get your body back. You don't get your name back. You don't get to move on as anything more than a change in density where plaster meets brick. What you get, if you hang on hard enough to the idea that you were once someone, is a lever. A tiny one. Barely there, but enough, sometimes, to make a chair catch on a floorboard. To make a window stick when a hand tries to open it too far. To make a lock stutter when the wrong person tries the wrong door on the wrong night. Enough to make a man wake up before he sleepwalks all the way to a seam in the wall. Enough to make a new tenant's dog refuse, absolutely, to sleep against a particular patch of paint. He learned to pull that lever. Not often. Not always in time. But sometimes. Once he felt a young woman stand exactly where he'd once stood, fingertips brushing that fake smoothness. He felt the building swell with interest. He shoved sideways with everything he had left. The light in the room blew, bulb popping in a shower of glass. The woman cursed, jerked her hand back, went to find a flashlight. The house's attention drifted. Ignored meal. There'd be others. There always were. He couldn't save them all. He hadn't saved himself. But in the thin, stretched place where he existed, pinched between lath and mortar, he learned to do one small thing. He learned how to be. A draft, a misaligned hinge, a whisper of unease in the back of someone's mind that made them say, "You know what? I don't like this place," and walk away before the lease was signed. He leaned into it. Every time a stranger stood in the doorway of the top-floor studio, considering, he pushed as hard as he could. Make the room feel a fraction smaller. Make the silence feel a shade too deep. Make the light fall wrong on the sealed wall. Sometimes they still took it. Money wins a lot of small wars. But sometimes keys went back on counters. Agents shrugged. "Shame," they said. "Good space, it'll go." He waited. He worked. He counted every pair of footsteps that went back down the stairs and out into the street, instead of further in as a tiny blasphemy against the thing that owned him. He would never leave. Not really. But if the house had forgotten what people were, he hadn't. Not yet. So, if one day you find yourself standing in a too-quiet top-floor flat in an old building, looking at a suspiciously smooth section of wall and feeling, for no good reason, that something in there has turned its head toward you, listen to the draft under your shirt, the way your hand hesitates an inch from the plaster, the sudden, irrational urge to sleep somewhere else. That's not the house talking. That's what's left of whoever it got last, begging you, with every splinter of themselves they can still move, to remember you are alive. And the wall is not, yet, yours. If this story unsettled you, subscribe and stay close. What comes next goes deeper.